Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my perfect agony cast on crit poison Bladefall assassin. Now, what's the whole idea behind this? Well, assassin I haven't made in over a year. I think the last time I did an assassin was my hitless build for Sanctum, and it's basically built around perfect agony. This keystone got a really big buff this league. It used to be like, I think it was crit damage applied at like half value, crit multi applied at half value to ailments. Now it applies at full value, and it doesn't even have the less damage with hits that it previously had on here, which I think is pretty dang cool. And I think it opens up a reason to play Assassin, which I'm doing cast on crit poison with Assassin. The idea is essentially we stack a bunch of generic percent fizz, percent chaos. These first two nodes here we get kind of double value out of because the percent fizz and chaos both apply, so that's pretty cool to have small nodes at the start that are that value, 20% per point, about a little bit more. And then we pair that with things like a few cluster jewels, that's giving us percent fizz there, and then we combine it with an overwhelming malice. I gotta be honest, this thing right here with the change to Unholy Might is actually quite very reliable. It's 10% chance to gain Unholy Might for a critical for 4 seconds on critical strike, which, you know, 1 in 10 hits, but we hit a bunch of times per second between our Lancing Steel and our Bladefall getting procced that we have basically 100% uptime. This, like, that within a second of us attacking a monster, we will have this, which gives us the full fizz to cast conversion, and it gives us the 25% chance to apply Wither on hit. So I think that's pretty dang cool, especially with the change on Holy Might, and I have to say it works quite well in this sort of character. Now that's the offensive plan, is basically going into poison, leading into that fizz to cast conversion, Wither on hit, and cast on crit setup using the assassin. Defensively, however, I have to be honest, I'm falling in love with the change they did to Ward and the new Yin to Stand. If you don't know, Ward essentially is a defensive layer which says it can take 1 hit and then all of it goes away. So the way it works is, say you have 5,000 Ward, if you get hit with a 5,000 damage hit, it will absorb all that damage before it goes to your HP pool, and then it has a reset time. Right now it's 2 seconds. Previously, I think it was like 4 seconds. So they they cut the reset time like in half, which makes it much more reliable. And then on top of that, they added in this unique, which allows you to get quite a lot of ward. You'll see we have 5,000 ward, but we didn't really invest into ward. We have 2 rares, which have some ward on it, and then we have the belt, and then the rest of our pieces are dedicated to other things. We're not trying to scale with any percent global defenses or anything like that, and we still end up with a very sizable ward amount that is quite healthy and helps for most sizable hits that prevent us from getting one shot in many scenarios. For example, a Shaper Slam, something this build would normally get one shot by. That extra 5k barrier is the difference in us consistently tanking that and not consistently tanking that, and it's always there when we need it for the slam. So I'm a big fan of the ward. And before I go farther, I'm going to specify specifically ward. It doesn't just get disabled when you get hit for 5,000 for 5,000. Like say you have 5,000 ward. If you get hit by 50 damage, that will disable the ward for the timer as well. So basically what happens is it can absorb as much as it can absorb for 1 hit, and then it has a reset time. That base reset time is 2 seconds, which 2 seconds is a decent amount of time. But if you get a couple pieces of faster restoration of ward, I have 2 gear pieces with faster restoration of ward, 58, you'll see our timer is actually 0.9 seconds, which is actually very quick. And we have it up for pretty much the vast majority of hits we get hit by, especially in boss fights where there's delays in how often the boss hits you. Now, ward is good. With that being said, you really want to pair it with avoidance layers like block or evasion. If you don't take damage, the ward does not get disabled. So for example, if you block the hit, that hit will not remove your ward, and thus gives you a healthy barrier where, say, an enemy would normally hit you consistently 2 times per second. But if you have over 50% chance to avoid that damage, the likelihood that, you know, 1 out of every 2 hits you're blocking and then the other hit is getting the ward, you'll more realistically consistently have that ward up when you need it. So we're pairing with Savalans. This shield is just crazy good for avoidance. Lucky block is very powerful, and it allows you to consistently have some sizable, reliable block and avoidance layer. Now this is great to make your EHP go big, but you really need to pair it with something that helps your max hit. Due to the fact we are using it with ward. So we have 5k ward, 3k life. We have 2.4k ES. We're actually using Mind Over Matter. So our total raw EHP pool, or raw HP number, is basically like 10 to 11,000. So not only do we have great avoidance with something like Savalans, but then we have a big number behind it. So that way, even if we do get hit through our block, we're able to tank that damage. We, of course, are also pairing this with Not great evasion, but okay evasion. We have roughly about 7,000 evasion, 46 evade. Not the greatest, but it's something when you consider the fact that we're pairing that with block as well as suppression and ward. It adds into reliably, consistently having something there to pair with the ward, and it feels pretty good. And how are we getting to that evasion number? It's essentially pairing Conquest Lambelar, which we're using with Yinda's to get a good ward number, which is a big evasion armor chest piece. And then we also have a high ES helmet with Escape Artist. Escape Artist, honestly, it's just very, very strong given the new bases, and it ends up being quite reliable. So this allows me to invest into ES here, and it gives me energy shield from this chest piece as well. Fun little fact here is Yinda Stand pairs with Escape Artist without mitigating the amount of energy shield you get. So you'll notice when you put on Yinda Stand, you lose the evasion amount you would get because 60% of it is basically converted to ward, but it does not prevent Escape Artist from giving you the full amount of energy shield. So Escape Artist, for example, I guess I can't press Alt on it. I think it's like 1 energy shield per 6 evasion. I think it's something like that. So for example, on a chest piece like this where you have 3,700 evasion, I think that's about 600 energy shield it's giving me. I could be wrong on the number, but I think it's 1 per 6 roughly. It still gives me that energy shield. So like if I take off this belt, you'll notice my energy shield does not change. So it pairs perfectly with Escape Artist where you get the full benefit of the energy shield amount without getting the negation where it converts that evasion over. The energy shield it grants you is based on the number here, not the amount of evasion you're actually getting from the chest piece. And then on top of that, if we have an energy shield helmet here, we get a nice amount of evasion. And I think this is giving us, maybe it's 1 per 6 for this. I might have them confused, but basically this is giving maybe 2,000 evasion, I think, roughly. Don't quote me on that. Maybe this is 5 evasion per 1 energy shield. I have them kind of the numbers mixed up, and I don't have Escape Artist in front of me, so I'm being a bit forgetful. But the idea is these jewels aren't too expensive. I bought the set for about 150 chaos a few days ago. They've gone up to about a divine per, so the whole set costs 2 divines. But what you're getting out of it, if you look at these 2 items here, is roughly 600 energy shield and about 2,000 evasion. That's a lot of raw flat stats, and it helps us get a decent evasion number, so our evasion is not basically nothing. It's actually doing something. And then it sizably allows us to have a decent ES pool, which pairs great when we want to go and click Mind Over Matter. On top of that, we pair it with Gain on Hit Energy Shield from Discipline, a 1 mod Watcher's Eye, which gives us a lot of sustain, and it's just a nice extra buffer of total EHP. One of the things you lack on an Assassin or a Shadow in general is it's kind of hard to get a good base number. For example, it's hard to get a good HP number, and this is some way where we can start to supplement that with Ward, with these ES numbers, and so on. Also, we are doing Poison, which makes Ming's Heart just insane damage. So we have reduced life, reduced ES on that, and I'm trying to counteract that by adding in a bit of flat from other sources, just so we can still end up with a pretty good raw total number that is behind our block and evasion layers. We also have Lucky Suppress with about 50% suppression. This could get better if you really min-max. You could end up getting suppression on gear pieces. You could lose a bit of ward and end up trying to force your way into capping suppression. For example, if our chest piece had suppression on, and then you had suppression on these boots and gloves, and then you were able to afford suppressed tattoos, you could cap that off as well. But this is more of a budget character. I've spent roughly around the range of 30 divines on this character. Give or take a few more or less depending on how prices fluctuate, but this is meant to be a character that would work on a tighter budget more reasonably so, versus these other characters I've been doing, like my Trickster, for example, is just like multiple mirrors, and I'm just trying to get some contrast in. So people that like characters I play, I want to make some characters that are a lot more doable for somebody who doesn't have the grind or the time to make multiple mirrors of currency. All right, anyways, outside of that, I decided to pair in some Grand Spectrums for minimum powers and minimum frenzies. This seemed like a decent option and some res, but you can do rare jewels as well. Honestly, I'm not sure these are better than rare jewels. They'd probably be similar. I think we needed the minimum in power just a little bit to cap the crit. I didn't actually check it in POB, so depending on like if you factor in brittle, you factor in the poison from the assassin, maybe we're crit capped without it. You can do that. If you can check that math if you want to, but I think this felt like a reasonable option to do considering the power Grand Spectrum was 100C. The res Grand Spectrum was like, I think it was 80C for this one with Cannot Be Hindered. And then the Frenzy Grand Spectrum was about 6 divines. So it felt pretty reasonable for the price, but you could probably go rare jewels as well. All right, outside that, we also have the block wheel here. We're investing into Tempest Shield. And our block, we end up with about 37 attack and 63 spell. That's close to the spell block cap. We could get to 68 technically, I believe, because we have +3 max block from the notable. Not the greatest on attack block here. If I was able to level the character more, I would have wanted to go for either a impossible escape here and considered getting like as the mountain wheel paired with inexorable, or a wheel here or a impossible escape here and grabbing this block wheel. I ended up going to anoint deflection, which gives us endurance charge generation, but ultimately if you wanted to go for higher block, you could anoint one of these other notables, which gives more block. I think the endurance charge is worth it because endurance charge is some good DR, and it's quite nice for defenses. Speaking of other defensive layers, we are also using Arctic Armor, which gives 20% less Fizz Dakin while standing still. So a lot of times you'll see when we tank the Shaper Slam, you want to be standing still. If you're moving, that's going to be probably the difference in you dying versus not dying to a Shaper Slam. We also have Flesh and Stone, which gives 20% DR to basically enemies that are within your circle. So a lot of times you want to be point blank in their face, and you'll have DR from that as well. We also paired up in Herald of Agony, a Discipline, and a Tempest Shield. So those are our auras. Discipline specifically to get a bit more ES and be able to put on the Watcher's Eye mod for gain ES on hit. And then Arctic Armor, Tempest Shield, you know, freeze, shock immunity. We have Brian King Pantheon for chill reduction and basically unlock prevention, and then we pair with Ralakesh to help us deal with bleed as well as corrupted blood. I did do Awakener, Uber Cirrus, Deathless without corrupted blood immunity on a Jewel, but it basically required me to use this flask once per each of his phases to remove the corrupted blood. Highly recommend getting corrupted blood immunity if you can get it, if you're planning to do Awakeners, but if you're not planning to do Awakeners, this works great for the occasional time when you get corrupted blood on you. Speaking of life sustain, because that's somewhat related, I have one, this can be either a Crusader ring or a Shaper ring, life gain on hit with spells. So the idea here is we have life gain on hit, ES Watcher's Eye, and then we have life gain on hit from this mod here, and that gives us basically a lot of sustain. We pair that with, I think, a life flask, and then a bit of regen like our body armor, for example, ES regen, benchcraft. So that's a lot of our sustain mechanics and how we're sustaining the character. Most of the time, the hits don't get past our ward, but when they do, you want some sustain to back that up. Our biggest weakness of this whole character is something like a Shaper Beam, because that gets by our ward, that gets by our block, that gets by suppression. So that's something that is going to be most dangerous to you. And when I did my set of 7 Ubers, I did all 7 fairly reasonably. The only thing I really consistently died to is I died to Shaper Beam, I think, 2 times. That was the main thing that ended up being the killer for us, was a Degen Beam. Other than that, the defensive layers are fairly solid, I would say. Now, all in all, this is a budget setup. If you want to go higher end, if you really want to min-max, you want to push those damage numbers up, there's some obvious recommendations I can say. Things like, for example, a Focused Amulet. Say you had a Focused Amulet that had, I don't know, +4 Fizz and 200 crit multi. That would be a massive damage increase. You would just need to supplement your crit chance a bit better elsewhere. Stuff like that are things you could do, but are completely unnecessary, but I'm just going to mention it right now. If you're thinking in your mind, Lance, you could have done this to make more damage, the answer is probably I was just trying to keep the cost down versus whether or not it'd be a good idea if you're trying to min-max or upgrade past with this actual skeleton in this character. Say you have more currency than I put into this character. Don't stop yourself from upgrading it more than we have here. So anyways, that's the brief outline of the character. Real quick, I'm going to mention this for crafting character gear. If you're wondering, I crafted most of this gear and I bought a couple items, and I'm going to give you a quick instruction on that right now. Number 1, probably your most expensive gear piece on this character to craft is the Conquest Lamellar. You're wondering, how did you get a 28 quality Conquest Lamellar that's item level 94? Really simple. I would recommend, there's usually like a break point. I don't know if it's 27 quality or 26 quality or 28 quality. Just search around, look up this base, but look for 28 quality. If it's 2 divines for the base, maybe go to 27 quality. Maybe the base would be 1 divine. Maybe it'd be 80 chaos. I don't know. There's kind of a break point where basically certain bases start getting bought up more than others, and there's a pretty big price hike. The difference in a 26 quality and a 28 quality is very small. So don't price gouge yourself depending on where the bases get more expensive. And then what you want to do is, once you have one of those bases that has a decent quality, you want to do a split. You want to make this a 6 mod item, do the Black Morgan split where it splits into 3, and then you will do essentially a 50-50 situation. You can raise the item level of an item level 84 to 86. That allows you to hit T1 suppression, for example, T1% armor evasion, so you can make the better version of the armor. And it's just a 50-50. You need to add in, basically, to our combinator, your base, which is your 26, 27, 28 quality Conquest Lamellar, item level 84. You need at least an item level 86 item, and it will 50-50 choose between your Conquest Lamellar and your other base. Do not overpay for an item level 86 base. For the most part, the average cost of making the item level 86 base yourself is a lot lower, and it takes 2 seconds to just chuck a couple bases in a thing and go for the 50-50. Hence why I'd recommend buying a base, splitting it into 3, and then you have 3 attempts to take that 50-50. So you make an item level 86 base, and then you dense fossil spam. I would dense fossil spam until you have at least 3k of both stats. The more the merrier. If you roll, for example, my chess piece is T1, T1, T2. This would be something that would roll in the range of 3,500, 3,500. And the way you get it to be 3,800, 3,800 is you throw on a tailoring orb. Tailoring orbs actually are a decently expensive currency cost right now, so you don't have to do that. I would say, depending on if you want to save currency, this is where you could save currency, is not doing the tailoring orb. It's roughly a 1 in 4 to hit about 8% defense. That's been my experience across doing tailoring orbs on a lot of past leagues, and that will increase the price of the chess piece a decent amount. A lot of the budget will go into the tailoring orb. That being said, if you do a tailoring orb, it can alter the links. So for example, if you complete the chess piece, you 6-link it up, and then you decide, oh, I want to go put the 8% defense on, I have some more money, that is going to potentially brick your links. So just know when you do tailoring orbs, a lot of times you want to do it before you link it up, or if you're going to do it after the fact, just know it's going to brick your links and you're going to have to resock it and relink the chess piece afterwards. Anyways, that's how you do the prefixes. You get the defense mods to be decent. At least 3k is what I'd recommend. Dense fossil spam. It's probably going to take you anywhere from about 50 to 200 dense fossils to get 3k plus. Should be pretty reasonably in terms of cost. Dense fossils aren't very expensive, and neither are one socket resonators. But you do that, once you have a good defensive prefixes on your chess piece, you're going to want to do a prefix can't be changed and reforge physical. The only physical stats you can hit are physical damage reduction. I believe this goes from 3 or 4% all the way up to 8%. Personally, if I got 5 or 6%, I'd be happy and just call it a day. That's up to you how many times you want to take the chance of prefix can't be changed or reforge fizz. It's roughly, I think, a 1 in 5 or a 1 in 4 to hit T1, something like that. You can check the stats. I think it's a 1 in 5. I think there's 5 tiers. That being said, when you do a reforge, you have a 1 in 12 chance to fill the affixes. If you fill the affixes, you're going to have to use an Eldritch Annul to clear up one suffix, for example, to benchcraft for for example, something like regen. And that is how you go about crafting this. Reforge fizz, maybe block a stat, slam, benchcraft the regen. That's how I'd recommend crafting this. Dense fossil, previous game change, reforge fizz, block and slam, and then benchcraft your last stat. And then you do Eldritch Currency. We just have a grand and a greater here. I wouldn't recommend doing conflict orbs unless you want to spend a lot more money to try to upgrade the stats. As for the other pieces, Lich's Circlet, I would just buy a T2 or a bad roll T1 Life Fracture, and then just do Dense Fossils until you get T1 ES, and then do Eldritch Currency, or, yeah, probably just Eldritch Currency, block and annuls, slams until you hit some okay suffixes that you're happy with. I have Rarity and Lightning Res, but you can go for maybe double Res, or maybe you need some ints, whatever it is. Outside that, for the other gear pieces, the only other pieces we crafted were the sword, which I would just recommend buying a fracture of either crit chance or crit multi or attack speed, and then do a base like I have here, like a serrated foil, a base that has decent attack speed and okay crit, and then do either an Essence of Zeal for attack speed, or you can do the Essence of Loathing for crit chance. Essence of Loathing most likely is more expensive, so probably do Essence of Zeal for attack speed. Once you have 3 stats on the suffix, you can just do craft hits can't be evaded, and you can be done. If you want to get more DPS, you can do a suffix can't be changed, and you can do a Veiled Orb and try to unveil chaos damage. I would not recommend this, as that will be very expensive. It's about a 1 in 10 to unveil % chaos damage, which means it could cost you north of like 100 divines just to go through 10 Veiled Orbs. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's the difference in the sword being, you know, a 1 divine craft versus 100 divine to craft, and it's a little bit of % damage. Would not recommend it. Temporal Chains enchant is roughly 3 time runes, so it's not too expensive, but it'll cost you a couple divines, and that's how we get our curse on hit for Temporal Chains. And then Despair, I'm just casting on the enemy when I get to something I need to do single target on. Otherwise, Temporal Chains throughout the map works just fine. The last item we craft is the Amethyst Ring here. Either buy yourself multiple Crusader bases or multiple Shaper bases, and the idea is I would recommend doing some Strength Essences until you either hit, well, if you hit life, gain on hit, you could probably just call it a day. I did some Strength Essences until I hit okay res, and then I did another ring where I did Reforged Life until I hit the life gain on hit mod, And then I just did some recombination with it. I didn't get too crazy with it. You can definitely make a better ring than this. This is just really, it fixed my res and gave me life gain on hit, and I called it a day. Okay, so that is the gear pieces I crafted. Now you'll notice there are 2 rares here I did not craft, and that's because there are very, very good ward rares on trade. If you've been playing this league, you know you can ship to Kalguur and it will come back with a bunch of ward rares. From my experience, you can buy pretty good items with basically ward restoration rate, a decent ward number, some life, and whatever miscellaneous stats. I'd recommend just shopping around for rares, and that's what I did, and I think it works out pretty well. I think it would be much harder to craft these in terms of cost versus just buying them off trade. I think there's a large supply due to all the ward gear being generated from people shipping to Kalguur and then just listing their items that come back with like T2 plus mods, and that's what I recommend for the ward gear. I spent, I think, about 80 C on these gloves, and then on the boots, I bought for 100 C. Now, okay, no, these boots I did add strength into. The int is obviously irrelevant, but that strength does help us hit a strength number we need. In terms of like being able to equip this chest piece, you need 173 strength to equip this chest piece. The strength, I'd recommend probably trying to get on a different piece of gear. Like, for example, you could get it on jewels if you don't go grand spectrums, or you could even spec a strength node here, or depending on how your craft went, maybe you could bench craft strength index on here, which would allow you to drop this node and swap it over here, whatever it is. But the point is, these boots I did do a veiled orb on, which is completely way extra cost without really a lot of additional benefit. I had hybrid attribute on this. I did these previously on my last ward character, and at the time I think I needed to strengthen it or something. I can't remember, but point is, don't try to force a veiled orb on your boots. I think it's a waste of currency. You can solve that problem simply by, like, for example, a bench craft here with strength and dex, and then swapping this node to strength, and that would probably work. That would solve your attributes. Anyways, that is the gearing. Let's go ahead and get inside a Uber Exarch, a little showcase to send off the build with. I would have played this character more than level 93. Full disclosure, it was killing the bitrate for my stream. Like, for example, in game, it lags a little bit because of the Bladefall. For me, I don't have the greatest PC, but it was like pretty nice in terms of like me looking at it. But for people watching the stream, it was completely killing the bitrate, and it'd be the difference in the stream seeming like it's 1080p or 720p and being like 144p. Long story short is I would have leveled the character more, and I would have maxed it out a little bit better if it wasn't completely killing the stream bitrate. So full disclosure, if you do play this, it's a lot of visual effects. You know, you have all the blade falls that come down, right? And that does affect things, so just want you to keep that in mind if you're thinking about playing the character. This is something where we could pretty much, I think for the most part, face tank. Uber Exarch, you'll see he does Uber Annihilation. Our block plus our ward does a pretty good job of preventing that. We shouldn't have too much issues there. That being said, where I've died previously to this fight was my Scorpion dude. He lasts quite a long time, and he can freaking run into the ball and get you hit by them. And so that's just something you need to keep in mind if you are playing this build on Exarch. Your minions can kind of just get you killed. Okay, now he's gonna go instantly in this other phase. I guess that's fine. I try to keep track a little about what's going on here. And not to get hit by the balls. My Scorpion is going to try to assassinate me. We got hit by a ball, and those ignites hurt. Not the best gameplay, but this is one of those things where if I had Ignite immunity, I could tank those a lot better, but not playing the best, so it's a little bit embarrassing. Oh well, it happens. I wanted to do Exarch Deathless, but that is probably the thing I'm still the weakest at doing, which is that ball phase right there. It's a little bit extra stressful too, because I have to be like paying attention to that Scorpion, because if the Scorpion gets hit, then I get hit, essentially. And I'm staying on degen ground. Oh, don't look at me, chat. Don't look at me. Sometimes he going through his phase. I think I'm doing damage to him. I see his health bar. I think we'll kill him from here. we'll call him. Oh, not my best showcase of doing an Uber Exarch, but sometimes you just throw, and it looks like we got Dragon's Gale boots. Annihilation's approach. All in all, that is what the character looks like. Hopefully I showcase what the character can do. It's fairly good generic mapping, fairly defensive in a lot of ways. Obviously in the Exarch phase, the Exarch, I chose Exarch because it's one of the fights that was a little bit hard to do, specifically because of the ball phase. The ground degen is very dangerous for us because degen we don't have, it's not like we're an Inquisitor where we have a bunch of sustain. We have good hit-based defense, but our weakness is a degen. I mentioned Uber Shaper because that's what I usually died to. I didn't actually die to Exarch ground effects the last time I did them, but I died to them in this showcase. And then that ball phase with the Herald of Agony, meaning when he goes around, he can cause you to get hit by more of those balls than you would otherwise. And we don't have Ignite immunity, which for the most part is not a problem in the vast majority of content. It is a problem in a fight like Uber Exarch where I don't have a lot of enemies I can hit for sustain. I only have one life blast and it can drain you down, and then you can step on the ground degen, and it can be a problem there. Anyways, character went 7 out of 7 on Ubers. I had a decent amount of fun with it. It killed the bit rate on my stream, so I had to stop playing it. But this is Poison Cast on Crit Bladefall. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out.